Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast. I, your host, Charles Long, and my co-host, our producer, co-pilot, and gunner, Jacob Goth, will be pitching a brand new television series to you today for you to imagine in the collective mind space that we all share as members of the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast community.
Yep, we're all one big hive mind.
Yep, it's great.
Or small. Depending how I don't really know how you become a big hive mind versus a small hive mind. Is there
I think we just have to infect more people with our ideas and our weird idiosyncrasies.
Yep.
You know?
Start another pandemic.
Yeah.
The very reasonable pandemic.
Very reasonable pandemic.
We could keep the acronym VRP.
Yeah, we keep the I feel like
brand.
We could get, put into like a all-white room that's like all the walls are made out of like plastic in the CDC, and they study us, and we just have to do the podcast from there. That would be fun.
We're already there.
Yeah. Like Magneto in the X-Men movies, the good X-Men movies, and the bad X-Men movies. Are there more?
Is that what your pitch is today? Are you
no,
pitching an X-Men?
Actually, this pitch that we're doing today is something that I've been working hard on, hard away, working in the mines, the content mines, working away, because this is following up on the promises made in episode 100. This is a sequel to a previously pitched series.
Really?
Yes.
What's the show?
The previous series in this franchise is Fear and Loathing in 2084, which I believe is episode 25 or something like that. Very early on. And this series, which I've titled The Hate, TheHeHate. I believe that is how you spell that.
So this is like a spin-off or a straight season 2? What is this?
I would say that this is not a season 2. It's just the same characters, but in a radically different format, if that makes sense. Because Fear and Loathing in 2084 was all about those characters driving across the country. The characters being Jimi King, the, wannabe poet musician, and H&M, or HM4-1749, who's a big, goofy robot man. And they drove across the country, stumbling into adventures, right? And this series, The Hate, follows them as they've reached the other side of the country. The events of the first series aren't really referred to all that often, but they are now in LA, and they're in a city, and it's a much more politically minded show. I started this... I start all of my pitch ideas by writing a very short thesis of what the show is going to be at the top of the page, and I wrote political satire sci-fi show. That was the original idea that I built off of for this.
Okay.
So it is very politically minded. There's lots of references to modern day political, actions, as well as all sorts of weird, crazy sci-fi, cyberpunk things that will be like, whoa, that's weird, because this is, it's satirical, so it's funny, but there's also, serious moments, and is making, comments about society, but still, there's fart jokes, and, people get punched in the nuts.
Gotta love your fart jokes.
Everybody loves fart jokes. There's a joke in which, some stuff happens, and then H&M gets flashed. It's good. I like it.
So this is an adult show, like the previous one.
Yes, this is a very much adult show. This show will only be allowed on HBO Max. There is
NC-17.
NC-17, X-rated. All right. There is a group, in this world, there is a group called the Files, and their whole characteristics is that they have no limits to the hedonistic pleasure that they seek, and because it's the far-flung future, they can just do whatever they want in the streets. So there will be basically a constant parade of, a weird sex orgy stuff happening. That's just happening in the background of our show, pretty much constantly.
Oh, God.
So this is...
No one's going to ever make this show, by the way, just because of the rating.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. Probably not. You know what? It may be if we got, some Netflix money.
I mean, if you could put it on YouTube, that's probably about it.
Yeah, I mean, YouTube doesn't allow nudity.
I don't know. Game of Thrones is pretty crazy with that kind of stuff, too, so maybe HBO would take you up.
HBO would I feel like HBO would be on top of this. This would be
They go crazy. They do it live action, too.
I would love to do this live action. I would cast you as H&M.
I would rather die.
We would just have to get you, Because I imagine H&M is built like a brick shithouse.
So for the people that didn't watch the first episode, give us a brief, explanation. Who are our characters?
Okay. So Jimi King
going on?
is a wannabe poet musician. He has basically no real skill or talent, but he's very good at conning people out of money, and he's very good at getting himself into trouble for all sorts of various reasons. And he's just a normal human. He's lived on Earth in the United States of America his entire life. He is in his early 30s, and he is kind of a sleazeball and not a great person. I would describe him as having a heart of bronze rather than a heart of gold,
Yeah.
Like, he'll do the right thing most of the time, but if there's some way for him to benefit at the expense of someone else, he will most likely take it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And HM 1749, aka H&M, is a genetically developed vat-grown human who is created for the sole purpose of being a mining worker on a moon, out in space. And so he was created by a corporation because they didn't actually want to have to pay anyone, so they created this slave labor. And then H&M was granted his freedom by a class action lawsuit that found it to be unlawful, not because that it's basically slavery, but because it was taking away jobs from Americans. So they put a stop to it. So he is very odd. His anatomy is very different from a normal person's because he was designed for work, and that's it. So he doesn't have hair follicles. He can't sweat. He has to, pant like a dog. He doesn't have genitals, and his, stomach barely works. He can only, very watery foods, like soups and stuff like that, because he was mostly designed to, you just put, like RoboCop, you just pour a little bit of goop into, a tube, and that sustains him, right? And so he looks like he's in his late 50s, he's kind of old. But in actuality, he is only 22 years old. He's only been alive for 22 years, but he fell out of the vat a fully grown adult. A fully, 25-year-old adult fit to work. And so after he gained his freedom from the class action lawsuit, he came down to Earth, and he wanted to really get interested, or not get interested, he was already interested.
Get a feel for human culture,
Yeah, he wanted to...
what there is to life besides working all the time.
Exactly. He wanted to, experience life. And so he, being that, I think that the way that the characters are set up, you would think Jimi King is always looking on the bright side, because he's a poet, he's a musician, he's traveled, he's a well-traveled, experienced guy, but Jimi King is very cynical. Whereas H&M, who has spent his entire life working, you would think that he would have this, very sad, cynical point of view. He's very, goofy and hopeful and naive, about the workings of, human culture. But he's very much a glass half full kind of guy. Because, he spent his entire life in, hell, basically. And he's hey, I don't have to be on my feet for 48 hours at a time. I can sleep when I want and that sort of thing. So these two characters, they kind of bump into each other. We wouldn't explain that because it's always lame. And they, in the series, Fear and Loathing in 2084, they decide to take a red convertible and drive it across the country searching for the American dream. And in that, series, they meet all sorts of crazy characters, do all sorts of weird stuff, and, each episode they would go to a new town, and then by the end of the episode, they would either get run out of town or have to leave town for some reason,
Yeah.
Whereas...
I think that's a pretty good explanation. So then they end up, the end of that series, they make it to the other end of the U.S., right?
Yes. And this series begins, it's not strictly a sequel, so you wouldn't have to watch Fear and Loathing in 2084 to get this series, but it would certainly add something to it. Mm-hmm. They get to LA, and it is the last great huge American city, and it's got hundreds of thousands of millions probably of people, not probably, definitely, like a lot of people just crammed into this one city that is like walled off from the rest of the country, which is this vast desert, you know? And like you can see the ocean, but the ocean is like a horribly polluted mess because it's satirical and about the future, and that's probably what the ocean is going to be in the future. And so they go to LA to meet Jimi King's uncle, who he had recently received a letter from. So he's like, oh, my Uncle Clyde just sent me a letter, let's go meet him. They go to LA, they find out that Clyde has been killed, and that he has left them a apartment to stay at, basically. And so the series would follow their adventures throughout the city, meeting and interacting with all the different factions of people who live there, all the different kinds of people, different groups, what they're about, what they're going for, and how, like, these, you know, sort of ideas of personal and individual freedom and, you know, that sort of thing have evolved in this world. Right? So that's what the series would be about. And I have written a full script for the pilot episode of the series. I know, crazy. And so we are going to read a scene from that script. And, you know, I think it'll give you a bit of a view into how the characters interact with one another and how the world around them functions.
Mm-hmm.
So, here we go. Interior, the Shit Slinger Diner. Daytime. Jimi King and H&M enter a 50s-style diner that has all of the signage and menus in Mandarin. The patrons are of all shapes and sizes, an enormous mechanical gorilla with an exposed brain, a woman holding onto 2 globules of jelly that have one of her eyes in each of them, and a gang of 6 nudists eating soup. The boys saunter in and sit at the first open booth. A robot server comes to meet them.
Hello, 2 masculine individuals. How can I help you?
What can we get for this? Jimmy slams the $10 note onto the table.
That can get you 2 orders of miso soup. Miso soup?
We'll take that. Thanks. The robot takes the tenner and scoots away to retrieve the food. Jimmy looks over to H&M quizzically. Miso soup?
Yeah, miso soup was the best thing at the mess hall.
On the moon?
Yeah, on the moon.
I thought they just shoved a tube up you and pumped baby food into your stomach.
Well, that's how I was designed, yes, but they decided to integrate real food into our diet. Something about raising worker morale or something.
The bot returns with 2 steaming hot bowls of miso soup and places them gently onto the table.
If I can get you, gentle people, anything, please let me know.
The bot wheels away as they look at each other. Well, boyo, dig in. H&M greedily sucks down the soup like an enormous aquatic beast, swallowing ocean water to catch a fish. The liquid is gone in a flash as Jimmy picks up his spoon and gently slurps the broth. So, what do you want to do now?
Well, I've heard much about the beautiful vistas of Los Angeles offers. Maybe we could do that.
Sorry to say, bud. They ain't offering you jack.
Oh, why?
Let's just say you don't meet their pecuniary requirements. Just as H&M is about to launch into a barrage of questions, a loud chant interrupts them. We are here. We are weird. We are here. We are weird. A band of cloaked individuals walk by holding up signs with phallic imagery pasted all over. As the first row of files walks by, a second, more depraved row passes. Animals in black domino masks being ridden by naked men and women in flaming headdresses making sweet, sweet, honey-covered love on the back of the poor beasts.
What the heck?
Yeah, seriously, what the fucking shit is that? Oh, those guys? The naked, elderly man swivels his chair over to the boys and opens his legs wide while talking to them. H&M continues to look at the man as Jimmy quickly looks down and up and then diverts his eyes. Bunch of creeps call themselves files. Taking the brakes off life, doing what they want, when they want. Giving LA a dirty name. The man stands up and begins walking to the bathroom. As he walks away, H&M focuses on his hairy ass. Jimmy goes back to his soup. Well, that answers that. I'm finished, so let's get the hell out of here. Now, that was a scene from the show. And there's a bit, it's a little rough around the edges, but I like it.
I thought it was fun.
Yeah.
It was cool. I didn't have very many lines.
Yeah, that's fine.
But, it's okay. I won't cry about it. I'll just complain to my agent, I guess.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, your character gets a love interest, and my character gets to be sad. Jimmy King is a very sad man. Whereas H&M,
I didn't get more lines in the scene. That's all that Hollywood cares about, so.
H&M finds love. Isn't that great?
Yeah, well, I did find love in that scene.
You're right. You saw a man's hairy ass in that scene.
Yeah.
An old man's hairy ass. I wanted to leave, I wanted to be more gross about it, but I was like, I don't need to be.
You don't need to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, well, I want to be like, either he just looks at his hairy ass, or, he looks down at the seat and sees
yeah, we got it.
Yeah, we all get it. But,
I liked it. It was a cool scene. I read the whole script. It's quite fun as well. If you could give us a brief, give the audience a sneak peek on what the rest of the script was. Well, I guess not a sneak peek, just a summary.
Yeah, well, the rest
you're never
of
going to see it, so.
But, hey, never say never, but you're never going to see this. The script follows Jimmy King and H&M. They arrive to the city. There's, some jokes are made. They drive around. They get some miso soup. My favorite joke happens because Jimmy King is like, or H&M says, "Oh, are you worried the car's going to be stolen?" And Jimmy King's like, "No, I just got a new security system installed." And then you hear a gunshot, and there's just a dead man. And then Jimmy King's like, "I love modern technology." And then they go to meet Jimmy King's uncle, Clyde, who had sent him a letter to come and meet them. And they find out that Clyde has been murdered by the police, by the lapdogs. That would be the LAPD. In this future imagined. And referred to colloquially, is that how you say that? Colloquially?
Yeah.
Colloquially. By,
He's not doing great with pronunciations today.
I've been kicked in the head a few times today. Referred to
Only
as the lapdogs. Yeah, no, metaphorically, of course, last night, literally. But it was a different thing. And then they find out that Clyde's been killed, and he's left them an apartment. And this is one of my favorite jokes in the show, is that the apartment, like this, pretty, not a super expensive apartment, but this is like a, it's a nice apartment for LA, is a former, morgue that they've retrofitted, the, little slidey things that they put dead bodies in. They've just put, a blanket down on it, and they make you pay, $2,000 a month for it. Right? They don't have any room. There's a toilet in the corner of the room that doesn't work, and they just have 2 little morgue shelves that they sleep on. And H&M meets a woman named Jen, who is a little angry, feisty, but she's also, maybe she has a secret connection to other groups that are found within the city. Because I have written a lot of different organizations that live within this city. Because one of the major rules about LA at this point in time, in 2084, is that if you are caught protesting anything, you lose your right to vote. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You, anyone who's caught protesting loses their right to vote. So that means that about 60% of the population of LA is completely unable to vote for anything. So obviously there's just rampant corruption. And so some of the organizations that I have written down are CABs, which are the major rebellion group in the city that are living out of foreclosed government housing projects.
Okay.
And it's this huge underground organization of people trying to, make a positive difference for the city. And cabs, I just took the A away from a cab, because I'm fun like that and I'm not very creative. And then our
Maybe they drive cabs too.
I was thinking
You gotta have the acronym actually mean the thing it says too, because it's funny.
I was thinking that maybe that.
And then you could have a joke that's like, what does it mean? Oh, cops are bad. Well, I thought it had to do with the cabs you drive.
Oh no! What?
Oh no, that's just a coincidence.
What? No, that's a
or
taxi.
They can like realize, be like, yeah, that's a taxi. What's a cab?
What are you, stupid? Yeah. So.
Or they can be like, huh? I never really put that together. I guess that.
Man, we're smarter than we look.
Huh. There's a deeper meaning to all this, isn't there?
Yeah, I was thinking that maybe they had, like, they're not in charge of all the taxis in the city, but the taxi, like, companies are very close with the cabs. And so if any cab, like, leadership has to be transported across the city for whatever reason, they cannot, like, afford to ride in a car or walk or anything because they're under constant threat of assassination by the local government, because obviously it's a horrible dystopia. So all of the, like, cab leadership rides in the trunks of these cabs.
Oh my god, yeah.
So that's how they get everywhere. So it's like, it's really bad if you hit a car, if you, like, get into a fender bender with a cab, like a taxi, because you might have killed, like, a revolutionary just by accident. Our second group, our second organization, they're called the Riders. And they're this biker gang that is also the, you know, largest drug cartel in the city. And they, you know, pick up drugs from outside the city and bring it in. So they're just kind of the big smugglers of the city. Because while LA is, you know, in this universe, it's like this hub of trade and commerce and, you know, information, it's also kind of a prison. Like, people don't leave LA, but the Riders have managed to find a way to get in and out of the city relatively quickly and easily without having their, you know, bags searched or, you know, any of that stuff. So they're, you know, they're kind of the criminal element of this city. And then one of my favorites is the Inks. And the Inks are a paper-only newspaper.
Hell yeah.
Like, because they found that if any digital journalism is, you know, can be altered super easily by this government at this point, because, you know, everything's digital, so they can alter it online like that instantaneously, and then that's what becomes fact. So these guys, these journalists, guys and gals, figured that the only actual way to make sure that facts and, like, actual real information is being brought to the public is by making, like, an underground newspaper that is physical only. There is no digital way of getting it. So the Inks and the Cabs work together, but they are two separate organizations that have, like, different agendas. Like, the Cabs will happily lie to the, like, populace of LA if it will accomplish their goals, whereas the Inks would never. Like, the Inks, their truth is their guiding principle, whereas Cabs, their guiding principle is, like, the betterment of society, right? And one of the things that I think is funny that I haven't written down in the original pitch, but I've, you know, thought about since writing it, is that the way that they get the paper, because all trees are extinct now in this time frame, so the way that they get the paper is by recycled fiber from the sewer system. Like, all of the paper is made out of shit. Like, they have this really complicated, you know, paper press mill thing where they, like, recycle the fibers of feces into paper, and that's how they get, you know, that's how they remain untraceable. Because there's no, you know, vast amounts of paper being transported in certain places. They all make it themselves out of the feces of the city.
Yeah.
Our second, you know, our one of our last groups is the Files that you heard about in the scene. They are a hedonistic cult that has embraced all things nasty. They're all about every piece of, you know, every hedonistic desire you can imagine. They are indulging in it to an extreme that most would find revolting. And it's just, you know, that's what they're about. And they're not really on anyone's side. They're made up of the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich. This is not really a a group that is affected by the lines of socioeconomic, culture. They just kind of are files. And if you want to be a file, it's like the mob. Once you're in, you're in. It's like Eyes Wide Shut and the mob put together, because these guys are serious, and it's scary, but also they're all constantly naked or in like black robes, Okay. And then the last group is the Lapdogs, which is just a derisive name for the LAPD. And they're the police, and they're
you mentioned them a bit earlier.
Yeah, they're this like a thuggish police force that have like over militarized everything. They have like enormous guns, and they constantly wear fucking battle armor.
They dress like the judges. And
yeah, they're judges from Judge Dredd, but imagine if Judge Dredd was just like super corrupt and racist and just like a bad person, I mean, Judge Dredd is a bad person, but you know what I mean. Yeah. And so that's just the major organizations that exist within the city outside of the actual city government. So I've talked to you about episode 1. They end up sleeping in Clyde's apartment. Jimmy gets the top bunk, H&M gets the bottom bunk, and they go to sleep in their little morgue things. Episode 2 starts out. They get breakfast. Jimi King has hidden $2 worth of quarters in his shoes because he knew that H&M is terrible with money and he can't allow him to know all of the money. So these are the last like $2 they have available to them. And they're gonna, wake up and be like, all right, let's get breakfast. And they go downstairs and they park their car out front of this building. They get down, their car has been entirely stripped of all anything, all materials, all metals, tires, everything. And Jimmy's like, oh shit, I forgot to load the security system. I needed to put another bullet into it, but I forgot. Shit. So they are like fresh out of cash. They have nothing to sell. So they both decide that they need to make money. So Jimi King decides to just go out into the street and busk, because he's a poet/musician. So maybe we have a scene where he steals an instrument from like someone, like a flute or something, not something big. And he, starts busking, and he people pass him. He makes friends with like the other street people, and he just kind of gets the lay of the land. And while that's happening, H&M unwittingly becomes a member of the Inks. Just by accident, because he sees somebody who's like trying to carry a big bundle of newspapers in somewhere quietly, and he's just like, well, do you need any help? And he like goes and he helps him out, and then like inadvertently becomes a member of this like underground information highway, right? So he's he gets basically adopted by this group of newspaper people. And he, goes around with them and hears about their philosophy and hears about what they think that the city, what the problems with the city are. And he, meets people, and he's, basically the delivery boy, because nobody fucks with H&M because he's huge. He's like 6'7" or something. Like he's very tall and very like, not muscular, but he looks like if you hit him, your fist would just bounce off of him, if that makes sense. He looks like a brick wall of a man. And so they both Jimmy and H&M, throughout their adventures during the day, they, both eventually end up at the Future Ball game, which is the sport that is basically every sport that we have now mashed into one. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Like a football, but they have they play with an American football, but they use their feet, and they have ping pong paddles like attached to their hands, and they have to like smack each other. It's like every sport that you can imagine just shoved into one thing, and everyone loves it. And so this Future Ball game ends with a riot. And so Jimi King and H&M like find each other in this riot that's happening, and like H&M is just trying to get out because he's kind of scared. Because, he's never been in a riot before, and Jimi King is, like, throwing Molotov cocktails and, like, having a ball. And so they both escape, and, some like, and manage to get back to their apartment, but not before they are, they have their pictures taken by some lapdogs, or like one of the security systems like captures their faces. And so, there's just like a bit of animosity set up between Jimi King, H&M, and the government, right? So that's how the second episode ends. They made a fair amount of money with the busking and the newspaper stuff. So Jimi King decides he wants to go bar hopping. And while he's bar hopping, H&M decides to go meet his ink friends. And he finds out that I wouldn't say love interest, but a bit love interest introduced in the first episode, finds out that she is one of the inks. And so, they start to get closer and closer while H&M, he thinks he's found his calling, sort of, because he's spent his entire, life on Earth looking for, not just the best of human culture, but a reason to be, if that makes sense. He spent his time looking for something worthwhile to devote his time to, and he thought for a while that thing was Jimi King, because he was like, this guy, he cares about me, and even though he's a bit of an asshole, he's still my friend, and he's my first friend.
Yeah.
And so he's doing that, and while that's happening, Jimi King gets progressively more drunk as he goes bar hopping, and gets brought into this sect of cabs, this really revolutionary sect of cabs, if that makes sense, this group that they want to blow up something or other. So he's just this drunk idiot getting drawn into this super crazy political group. And he's eventually while being absolutely plastered, helps them free what's the thing that people do, the Greenpeace people, when they free a bunch of chickens, I don't know what's that's called, but he ends up doing that. But they don't have chickens, they have cowkins, which is a cow and a chicken put together through genetic modification.
It's got chicken feet. Maybe a chicken face, but cow body.
Yeah, it's got the big fat cow body, but little chicken feet, which I think would be very funny.
And it can't stand up. That's the worst part. The chicken feet are not strong enough to hold it up, so they just lay on the field.
Yeah, they have to get wheels for him, and Jimi King manages to wheel him out. And because this is the future, all of his revolutionary friends that brought him into this die horrible deaths, and he's not that phased because he's drunk, and also he's just met these people. But I think that the scene ends, or that the episode ends with Jimi King. He gets this animal that he's come to care about out of the city, or out of the farming plant, and he's got it on this little track, a wagon, and he's all right, Dave, go be free, and he pushes the thing out, and he's drunk, so he's not very smart, and the cow, what'd I say it was? Cowkin. The cowkin just rolls down a very large hill off a ramp into where do they get rid of an incinerator? So all of that effort is for naught, because the cowkin gets absolutely destroyed by an incinerator, and then Jimi King's well, shit. And he takes another drink. Right? And then they go back, and and at the end of each episode, they meet up at the apartment, and they talk about, their days. And Jimi King doesn't want to talk about his day after that day, because he's like, Dave, I missed him so much. I don't want to talk about it. Episode 4, I think, is one of the more fun ideas. Fun. Jimi King and H&M wake up in a trash heap, and they have to memento their way into figuring out why they're in a trash heap. And, maybe H&M's got a huge tattoo on his back or something. How Ben Affleck has a giant phoenix tattooed on his back?
No.
Oh, Ben Affleck has a big dumb phoenix tattoo, and maybe H&M has the same tattoo, and it's just really stupid. But I haven't really written very much for that episode because, they memento their way to figure out. There are all these clues. Maybe they find a video of themselves doing something silly.
What's the solution, though? What's the...
I don't know. What should the solution be? You know...
Oh, geez. Okay, I didn't realize that was the... I thought there was... you had the end of it.
Oh, no.
No, you just had the idea.
My idea for the solution was, like, they managed to fuck with the riders, you know? And so they end up getting, like, roped into this drug deal that goes south, and they both get, like, you know, way too high by accident, and then they wake up in a trash heap because the riders thought they died.
It would be funny if the whole episode was them thinking it was bigger than it was, you know? Mm-hmm. In reality, it was that they got high and, it was some drug that messed with their memory, right?
Yeah.
Or they blacked out drunk or something. That's what it was.
Yeah.
You know? And something very simple. But they think it's a huge conspiracy theory, and they're, like, investigating the lapdogs with the inks, and it's this whole big investigation and adventure with the inks. And like later the cabs get involved. It's this whole suspenseful, huge narrative. And as they finally are getting close to some big end of the mystery, Jimmy's like, "Wait, no, we just got drunk. That was all what happened. They had nothing to do with it."
Yeah, I was just.
And then they're like, "Oh, so they didn't wipe our minds to make us forget like some awful tragedy." And the cabs are like, "Well, I mean, they didn't, but we're about to uncover one right now." And they're like, "Well, I mean,
that's fine.
If they didn't wipe our minds, it's whatever." And then they leave.
Yeah,
they leave in the middle of the adventure at the end.
Yeah, and they're like, "Oh,"
like they would have uncovered some huge travesty that the lapdogs are committing.
Yeah, a huge conspiracy that's like been hidden from the city. And I would say that's a good idea, except for there is a huge conspiracy. That's like like the lapdogs are the lapdogs hiding evidence of like, ultra corruption, and the fact that maybe 60% of the population wasn't caught protesting. Maybe only like 5% of the population's been caught protesting, and the lapdogs have been inflating the numbers as to make sure that the people never gain any sort of foothold or power. Like, that's kind of the thing. And so that's kind of the arc of the last couple of episodes, because the last couple of episodes are when it gets a little more serious, But yes, I do 100% like the idea that they are, doing this big memento investigation, and they find out, like, they're about to uncover some amazing, like, huge thing, and then actually it's just a video of Jimi King trying to drink beer with his nose or something stupid. And then everyone's just like, "Jimmy, you fucking asshole. All right, wrap it up. We're done here. Get the hell out of here." All right. But yeah. And then season 5, episode 5, the boys go to a history park. And so a history park it's just like sort of a Disneyland, except it's all of American history. And obviously this is a situation ripe with satirical potential, right? Yeah. So it's all going to be lies, and it's, it's going to be stuff that we know is false, but it's very, you could take that, you could make that, you could see where the train of logic is for why they think that's what happened, but we know that's 100% false, and it's just lies from the government. And then while at the history park, they're contacted, or they meet up with these cabs, and I'm thinking maybe it's like, the final one, they're being chased by this gang of assassins, or like by lapdogs. And the like last cab standing gives our two boys like a chip or something, and like it's like, "You need to get this across town, or thousands will be," and he dies. And so Jimi King and H&M are forced to like make their way across town with this thing, this like USB that they have no idea what's on it, but this like entire time they're being chased by, this huge gang of assassins that's like ever growing and just like more and more dangerous. And Jimi King is not a fighter, and H&M is a lover, not a fighter. Jimi King's neither, he's just an asshole. So it's just like very, just the whole episode is they're on the run, and then the final reveal is the video, the USB has a celebrity sex tape on it. Like that's what they all died for. It was like, you know, a celebrity sex tape that's like going to make some people like a couple $100, right?
And the assassins are hired by the celebrity.
Yeah. The celebrity is like, I need to get that. My wife can't know that I'm doing it with the pool boy. And then, you know, the final, you know, thing is, the resolution is, she was also doing it with the pool boy. Now they both do it, the pool boy together, you know? Or something like that. Yeah. So that's episode 5. I've got episodes 6, 7, 8, and 9 left to explain, but I don't need to get into as much detail. It's just a bit these episodes 6 to 9 are a bit closer to serious storytelling, I guess, because it's about Jimmy making friends with a cab, and you know, they, you know, are buddies, and they decide to go to a protest, and then Jimmy's friend is murdered by the lapdogs, and so he's like, he finds the cop that killed his friend, and, you know, really just gives him the business, like really just beats the shit out of him, but realizes that that's not going to change anything, you know. There's no way that one person can change the system from the outside. It needs to be changed with either systematic or revolution. Systematic change or revolutionary change. That's what Jimi King realizes by the end of it. And all the while, H&M is just kind of on like a sort of love subplot where he's like wooing this girl, Jen. And, you know, they go on dates and all this stuff, and it's kind of like a cute love story that's kind of set against this very dramatic story of like police brutality. And they're just kind of, you know, set across from one another as being like two sides of the city. And yeah,
got a Romeo and Juliet story.
Yeah, sort of like that.
And they kill each other at the end instead of killing themselves.
Yeah, something like that.
No, I was just kidding.
Now they kill everyone else, and then it's just the two of them, and they kiss. That should be it. That should be how the series ends.
They nuke the whole city. I really like that show. It was cool.
Yeah, and the final arc is Jimmy and H&M teaming up with all of the friends they've made along the way, with all the cabs, and with Jen, who's part of the Yanks, and they collect this really damning evidence, which is actually 60% of the population isn't barred from voting. The LAPD has just been lying to you about that. And they get this like huge damning evidence, and they're being chased by the lapdogs, and they're being, chased by the mega corporations that don't want this evidence displayed, and they're trying to get to this one huge like news place where they can play the evidence in front of everyone. And that's like the second to last episode is this race against time to get to this news station. And then they get there, they play the evidence, and they think that, like, we've been vindicated. Now the public will know, and they'll revolt. This is what's going to happen. And just as, like, they're, like, full of hope and everything, and, as soon as they think they've won, their hope is dashed away. And it turns out that the game was rigged from the start. There was no way that any of this was ever going to be displayed for the public. And that's when I think Jimi King really does break, right? Because he doesn't. H&M has Jen, like he's got someone that he cares about. Jimi King, all of his friends have been killed. His family have been killed by this system of government that has done nothing to help him ever his entire life. And so, the only time that he thinks that he is, gotten the truth out, it's dashed. His hopes are dashed away from him by just a system built to make his life worse. And that's when he really, it kind of like a part of him breaks. And so he manages to convince the cabs and the inks and the files to all march onto City Hall. So Jimi King basically instigates this enormous citywide riot that leads to like hundreds of millions of dollars of property damage, and like government buildings being destroyed, and like politicians having, maybe being killed, but like guillotine style, maybe we could have like some very cool imagery where they like take a political like poster or something, like what do they call, what's a sign that you have on the side of the road? You know, when
Billboard.
a billboard. Yeah, they take a political billboard and they like chop it up and like and work the metal to make it into a guillotine.
Oh my God, Charlie, this is a really fucked up ending.
Yeah, it is. And then, you know, that it's like he inspires this riot, and he sees, you know, all of the violence that's wrought by him, but he knows that nobody is really, it's not going to change anything. That the only real way to win the game is just not to play, because he knows that once this power vacuum has been opened up, just more bad people will take it. So it ends with Jimi King and H&M. They steal a car from the city hall, from the governor's mansion, and they drive back out into the desert. H&M knowing that he can never truly find love because he's not fully a man. And Jimi King knowing that no matter how hard he tries, the world will never be perfect. And that's how the story ends. With them driving out into the desert as All Along the Watchtower plays.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, Charlie. This is a story for a book.
It's not a happy story.
Not for a TV show.
It's not,
because TV shows need somewhat decent endings that are somewhat morally hopeful or resolute.
Yeah. This ending.
A book you can end with a sad ending that's depressing like that, but
yeah.
I mean, God, everyone dies and then they just leave, and their final conclusions are everything sucks and there's nothing I can do about it.
The only way to win the game is not to play. That's what Jimi King realizes. Sorry if I made everyone sad, but I worked hard on this, so I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you all for listening to the Very Reasonable Pilots podcast. I've been your host, Charles Lung. With me as always has been my co-host, editor, producer, co-pilot, and gunner, Jacob Gloth. If you like what you heard here, and you want to hear more, please give us a like, a follow, a subscribe. I promise 99% of the episodes are not as bleak as this.
The next one, I can assure you, will not be bleak. This is mine.
Not be bleak and sad. I would say that this and Human Meat are the two bleakest ones that we've made. Can you think of
This was far more bleak than Human Meat.
They're literally eating human meat. Human meat. And nothing gets better in human meat. But you know what? Thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. It may not have made you happy, but I hope it made you think a little bit. Goodbye.